Hey guys, Jordan here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Acer Predator BiFrost RX 9070 XT. Now this was recently collected for another media, so instead of a full unboxing we'll do a quick walk around with the B-roll that I filmed so you can see what it looks like, and then we'll get straight into the results. So this is a 2.5 slot card, just under a kilo, with a triple fan Frostblade 4.0 cooler, 16GB of GDDR6 memory on a 256-bit bus, delivering up to 460GB per second of bandwidth. For clock speeds, this is rated at 2700 MHz base and then boosts up to 3100 MHz on this factory overclocked model. In terms of I/O, we've got one HDMI 2.1 and 3 DisplayPort 2.1 outputs with support for up to 4 displays and resolutions all the way up to 8K. It's running a PCIe Gen 5 X16 interface, and Acer recommend a minimum power requirement of 340 watts, and this model also comes with a 3-year warranty and Acer's intelligent space software for monitoring and tuning. So let's get into the results and see how this performs. As usual, we're using our test system, which is the Intel 12900K on the Asus Z690 Hero. We've got 32GB of Kingston Fury Beast DDR5 at 5600 megatransfers per second with a 1TB Seagate Firecooler 530 boot drive, and the system is all powered by an EVGA 1300 watt power supply. So starting off with 3D Mark, in Temps by at 1440p, the Predator scores over 27,000 points, which puts it well ahead of the 4070 class cards and roughly in line with the upper mid-range GPUs. It's a strong result for raster performance and lines up well with what we see in real games. Now for Steel Nomad, this obviously is more of a CPU benchmark too, scoring just over 7,000 points, landing above the RX 7800 XT and RTX 4070 and closer to the 5070 level territory. Now onto gaming results, I'm going to focus on the 1440p first because that's where most people are going to run this card, and then I'll run the 4K afterwards. So first up, we've got Apex Legends. The RX 9070 XT averages just over 280 frames per second in this title, which is very strong for overall performance. It does sit comfortably above the RTX 4070 class cards again, and not far off the 5070 level results. That said, the 1% lows are noticeably weaker here than several Nvidia cards, which suggests that the frame pacing isn't quite as consistent in CPU heavy esports titles. You do get high peak FPS, but not the smoothest competitive experience in this game. Now moving to Crysis, the Predator shows a much better result here at 1440p. It delivers around 240 frames per second on average, clearly ahead of the RTX 4070 and 7800 XT class GPUs. And in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the 9070 XT averages just over 210 frames at 1440p, putting it again ahead of the 4070 level cards and closer to the RTX 5070 territory. The 1% lows here are fine but not exceptional. Now Dirt 5 is one of the standout results for the Predator card here. Average frame rates well over 200 FPS, which is more competitive with the more expensive GPUs, but more importantly the 1% lows here are really great, showing really stable frame delivery and one of the strongest results for the card in the test suite. Starfield, one of the tougher games in the suite, especially for AMD, and that does show here with the 9070 XT averaging just 100 frames at 1440p. Starfield's always been a tough game to run. The 1% lows here though are decent, but not class leading. Now Far Cry 6, another AMD favouring title, it performs extremely well, as you'd expect, 146 frames average, which is matching or beating several Nvidia priced cards. 1% lows are respectable, though not exceptional. This is another strong win though for AMD with the strong raster focus. Now the most intensive title in the suite, Cyberpunk. Without ray tracing, we see 145 frames average. 1% lows here are solid, giving a very smooth experience, and the raster performance is genuinely strong. Once the ray tracing is enabled, it does drop back noticeably. Average frame rates sit just above 50 frames a second, with 1% lows in the low 40s. Ray tracing not this card's strongest point, and I definitely recommend some FSR if Cyberpunk is a title you're planning to play with it. Now onto 4K, I'm going to reel through these ones pretty quick, so feel free to pause if you want a more detailed look. The performance pattern doesn't really change into 4K, you're just going to be trading the raw frame rate for resolution. The 9070 XT still sits in the same relative position compared to the other cards, just with lower FPS across the board. Now regarding thermals and power, we had a high hotspot temperature of 101, very warm compared to other cards. When you remove the 19.5 ambient, that's 81.5 delta, and in this chart you want to see a card as low as possible, so this one unfortunately struggles. Now, one thing worth talking about here is the cooler design. Even the lower tier cards like the 9060 XT ship with fairly large coolers, so once you move up to the 9070 XT, which draws more power and produces more heat, the cooler design becomes a lot more important. Now, on the Acer Predator card specifically, the heatsink and fans are smaller than Sapphire's 9060 XT, for an example, despite being a higher power, higher clock GPU, and because of that the card has to heavily rely on higher fan speed to control temperatures, and that then it shows up in the acoustics. Now, this is actually the loudest graphics card that I've personally tested so far. I did record a quick sound sample for you to hear that you can check out so you can hear it for yourself. So very loud, as you can hear there, and if you compare this card to the 9070 XT Prime, it's physically larger overall, bigger heatsink, larger fans, and that extra mass just allows it to move the same amount of air with lower fan speeds and lower noise. So with the Predator, the trade-off is just clearly higher noise, especially to the larger, heavier coolers. It does redeem itself in the wattages though, pulling a high of 533 watts, which is not too bad compared to the Prime's 594 watts. Also worth mentioning as well that Acer have only done a couple of generations of graphics cards, so I'm sure over time they'll figure things out with the thermals and things like that. But certainly a hotter card, and one that I wanted to mention. Not dangerous temperatures, but certainly something worth mentioning for airflow restricted cases. So overall, if you're after a strong master performance, high frame rates, you've got a well ventilated case, the Predator 9070 XT delivers the performance you'd expect from this tier. As always though, pricing and availability are going to be the deciding factors, especially with the memory issues we're currently having. That's going to be the determining factor on how compelling this card really is. Of course, if there's anything else you'd like to know that I haven't covered, please leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please get subscribed and ding the bell if you did. Big thank you to Acer for sending this out for me to look at. I'll leave the links down in the description box below if you want to pick one up. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.